In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
God has experienced what it is to be human.
Christ has been there before me. Christ stands beside me. Christ will always hold me in his hand, no matter what life brings.
Do we accept the challenge to welcome Christ into our hearts and homes this Christmas?
May the Christmas season be a time of real joy for us all, as we rejoice that God is with us in this child who is the Son of the Father, the Word made flesh.
Welcome back to this, our last episode of Invited for our Advent season this year. I am here at the shrine of St Philip Howard at Arundel Cathedral, and shrines like these are a reminder of the great saints who have gone before us and have given their lives so that we may live our faith more comfortably today. St Philip Howard is the patron saint of our diocese. He was the Earl of Arundel and a great favourite of Elizabeth I until he converted to Catholicism. He was then locked in the Tower of London, where he remained for 11 years until he died in 1595 of starvation or of poisoning. He was canonised in 1970 as one of 40 martyrs of England and Wales, and we give thanks for the legacy they have left for us. As we draw closer to Christmas, we begin to reflect on the arrival of the infant Jesus. But how can we make a home for Jesus every day of our lives? And how will that impact the legacy that we leave? To help us dive into this topic, we're joined by Father David Murphy. Father David has been a priest for 27 years and is currently serving in the parish of Our Lady and the Saints of Sussex. He has a fruitful mix of pastoral experiences between parish and hospital chaplaincy. Originally from Galway City in Ireland, he and his family have a long connection with our diocese, as his mother taught at St George's in Weybridge and his sister has spent time teaching at Worth. We're going to hear more about Father David's family now as we listen to his talk.
In this talk, I have 3 items I want to share with you. Firstly, I have here a photograph of an antique print, a copper engraving. The original dates from 1797, and this copy is in the hall of my mother's house. There are 2 elements to this work that I want to talk about. The first is location. Depicted is Old Loughlin Church, County Carlow, Ireland. County Carlow is where my mother comes from, and where her ancestors arrived when they came to Carlow from Yorkshire. The church shown is Church of Ireland Anglican. My mother's family were Anglican and Methodist before they were Catholic. No wonder I love hymns. Some of them would have worshipped at this church. Every time I see this picture, therefore, I am reminded of my heritage and legacy. Like much of the history of Britain and Ireland, it's deep and complicated and defies trite or easy definitions. The second element I want to talk about is more light-hearted. It may not be easy to see, but if you look down here, there is a water stain in the corner. This is not the result of water damage, dampness or a flood, but a water pistol fight my brothers and I had when we were children. We had great fun until the picture got damaged. When I look at the stain, I smile and remember the naughtiness of childhood, and a day that must be at least 45 years ago. Mind you, none of us were smiling when Mum got home and saw what we had done. When I was taking the photograph, I tried to avoid the reflection of my own image, but it was impossible to do so with the glass. However, when I reflected on it a little more, I saw that my reflection was actually a very important part of the process. In so much of our heritage and legacy, we see the reflection of ourselves and those who have gone before. The passage from Corinthians comes to mind. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know, even as also I am known. The second item I want to show you is this watch. Patek Philippe, the Geneva watchmakers, have as their catchphrase, "You never actually own a Patek Philippe. You merely look after it for the next generation." This catchphrase has been part of a remarkably successful marketing campaign since 1996. When it was launched, it was seen as being part of a theme of Patek's advertising entitled Generations. Heirloom timepieces evoke powerful memories and a strong sense of attachment. Jasmina Steele, when she began working for Patek Philippe in early 1996, realized that so much of advertising was driven by a focus on celebrities wearing or promoting your product. She wanted to change that, as she realized from our market research that celebrities fade, and often people become bored with the product associated with them, seeing it as outdated. Marketing the product in a personal way, with a link through the generations, would not lose appeal, she argued. She began to work with a colleague called Tim Delaney, and he describes the process. When shown pictures of celebrities and famous Patek Philippe owners, potential clients had an almost uniformly negative response. "What about me?" they would remark. "Why do I have to look at other people's stories and borrow the acclaim of others?" Delaney remembers some of them saying. Now this watch is not a Patek Philippe, but a Timex quartz. However, it is very generational and very connected with my faith story. I was with my late father when he bought it in a jeweller's in Dalgatly, Gwynedd, at the foot of Snowdonia in July 1982. We were there to visit a first cousin of my mother, who was a Carmelite. She is the reason I am called David, as I was born almost to the day that she marked her silver jubilee, and so my mother wanted a Welsh name. I was fascinated by the monastery. I thought it would be grim, dark, and being told that Sister Maureen, Mary of the Rosary, was behind bars certainly didn't help. The reality was transformational. We were brought into a lovely, bright, airy room with the sun shining in. Yes, there were bars, but the smiling face of Sister Maureen and the other sisters made it seem as if the bars didn't exist. The visit was the first time I could see that a vocation to the priesthood or religious life was something that could bring joy to the lives of those called to it. I returned to Sister Maureen's luminous face many times as I tried to figure out what God's plan might be for me. It was a classic case of metanoia, that Greek word that signifies a powerful awakening and change of mind and heart. In fact, I return to the lesson when I am figuring out any decision that is being made. If there was no joy in Sister Maureen that day, if she was angry and felt trapped and bitter behind the bars in the convent parlour, then those bars would suddenly have become evident, and the light would have emphasized her struggle. This, I now understand, was what one of my seminary lecturers, Father Mossy Hogan, was referring to when he talked about luminosity and its opposite, a descent into the darkness of Sheol, the underworld. Therefore, in summation, every time I look at and wear this watch, it evokes powerful memories, is part of my faith and vocation story, and is definitely one of those items I would try to save in answer to the hypothetical question of what you would grab if your house was burning down. The third and final item I want to share with you is another photograph. It is of our new parish icon for our newly constituted parish of Our Lady and the Saints of Sussex. And that's exactly what this icon depicts. In the East, an icon is as sacred as a tabernacle. Indeed, a litmus test for Christians under Soviet rule was to ask the suspected believer to walk across an icon. When they refused, owing to their abhorrence, they had been outed as a Christian. Icons are powerful, and they are never painted, rather written. Their legacy is a tangible reminder of a sacred story, and to contemplate them is to enter into a deep meditation on the mysteries of the faith. The icon here was written by Margaret O'Shea, daughter of a late deacon of our parish, David Boyd. Since it has been revealed, I find it does with me exactly what an icon is supposed to do. It draws me into a huge story, beginning with Our Lady and the child Jesus, who are the centre of the image, surrounded by the Sussex saints. These saints are Wilfrid, Richard, Louina, Dunstan, Margaret Pole, William Howard, Philip Howard, John Rugg, Thomas Pilcher, Thomas Garnett, George Gervais, Thomas Bullaker, Edward James, Thomas Percy, Edward Shelley, Ralph Crockett, Henry Webley, and Cutman. That's quite a list, isn't it? Now just think of the 19 life stories that each of these saints had. Think of the time span involved. For example, Lucy and Wilfrid go all the way back to the 7th century. Think of the courage and bravery of people like Philip Howard. That's an amazing inheritance, and one of which we should be rightly proud. On the wall of the sacristy in St. Richard's in Chichester, where I serve, we have in a frame items of Thomas Bullaker, namely a piece of his alb and some hair. He was executed at Tyburn in 1542. Returning to the icon, I love the imagery of the river running underneath. It is strongly biblical. I can think of Psalm 46. The waters of a river give joy to God's city, the holy place where the Most High dwells. Funnily enough, or maybe not, I also think of Tennyson and his poem The Brook. And out again I curve and flow to join the brimming river, for men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. That's the legacy of our faith. The curves and the flow, the flotsam and jetsam of life are but a precursor to the eternal river of God. The 4th Sunday of Advent this year falls on Christmas Eve. Today is December the 18th. No doubt your lives are full and busy. We might be asking, what gifts do I still need to buy? Will the Christmas dinner go well? Perhaps there are visitors you are expecting. Often, sadly, there is tension, and Christmas can be a very challenging time for many people. I often think of a psychotherapist I knew who told me that she dreaded Christmas, not because of anything in her own family, but because she said that so many people were looking for appointments for therapy, including often clients she had not seen for many years, and suddenly found it all too much at Christmas. The difficulty is we are sold an image of how Christmas should be, and we get upset if that is not our reality. For this reason, I believe our talk and gathering this evening is of crucial importance, not just because it is, hopefully, a little bit of time out in a busy week, but also because it allows us to refocus on the real message of Christmas. The fact that the fourth Sunday of Advent and Christmas Eve come together make next Sunday very potent. I began by showing you a photograph of a picture in my mother's house. Our legacy as Christians is rooted in a dynasty, a house, but not a house in the way we might think of it, consisting of bricks and mortar. It is deeper than that. The first reading from Samuel has words that should make us sit up. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. We have not here a lasting city, as the book of Hebrews also reminds us. When we grasp this, we begin to realize more about what seeing through a glass darkly might mean. The imagery of the cedar tree is worthy of note in the Bible, because the cedar tree holds symbolic significance and is often used as a metaphor or symbol for various spiritual and moral concepts. It is often associated with strength, durability, and majesty. This symbolism is drawn from the tree's physical characteristics. It is a large, sturdy, and long-lived tree. Its ability to grow tall and straight has led to its use as a symbol of spiritual growth and renewal. The cedar tree is also used in connection with royal and temple imagery. In the construction of King Solomon's temple, cedar wood played a prominent role due to its quality and grandeur. The use of cedar in the temple's construction symbolized the significance and magnificence of the house of worship. Cedar is also mentioned in the context of purification and healing. With this in mind, we now see the significance of David's concern about living in a house of cedar while the ark of God was in a tent. Arising from our first reading and thinking about legacy, we might now like to pose the following questions. Where are my roots? Do I put God in a tent while I live in a house of cedar? How do I approach the sanctuary of God? What will my own legacy be? Do I seek purification and healing? What use will I make of the sacrament of reconciliation this Christmas? The second item I showed you was a watch, a timepiece. Our second reading for the fourth Sunday of Advent, Christmas Eve, sees Paul write about the revealing of a mystery. To God who is able to strengthen you, according to my gospel and the proclamation of Jesus Christ, according to the revelation of the mystery that was kept secret for long ages, but is now disclosed. In these final verses of Romans, Paul expresses his understanding of God's plan of salvation through Jesus Christ. The mystery of salvation, once hidden, has now been revealed to all nations through the prophetic writings. This revelation aims to lead people to faith and obedience. The doxology at the end glorifies the wise God who accomplished his salvation through Jesus Christ. Questions we might pose here are: how do I understand the phrase, long or endless ages. What of my own time? What do I give my time to? The Christian faith is for all people at all time and at all ages. Do I believe that? This Christmas week, what will I give my time to? In God's time, salvation is accomplished. How do I see God's time? Finally, I showed you our new parish icon, depicting Our Lady and the Saints of Sussex. Our Lady is at the centre of this icon, as she is at the centre of our Gospel today. The passage narrates the angel Gabriel's announcement to Mary of the miraculous conception and birth of Jesus, the Son of God. It highlights Mary's initial confusion and ultimate acceptance of God's plan, as well as the extraordinary nature of Jesus' identity and mission. Mary's willingness to submit to God's will becomes a pivotal moment in the unfolding of God's redemptive plan through Jesus Christ. Always remember this: Mary could have said no, but her yes, her fiat, makes God's plan possible in the lives of the saints of Sussex, in all the saints of all time, in the uncanonized, in you and I. Our Christian journey follows a course just like the river in the icon. It may meander and get narrow in places, but the great yes of Mary means that our destination to the great ocean of God's love is possible. The footsteps of those who went before us, marked with the sign of faith, allow this message to be handed on to us. Let us be ever thankful, and maybe conclude our talk with the following questions. Do we accept the challenge to welcome Christ into our hearts and homes this Christmas? Is the crib at the centre of your Christmas decorations? Returning to Mary's yes, why that girl and that time? What about Mary's knowledge of prophecy and the turning of her thoughts back to David? Will Mass at Christmas be for me a renewed encounter with the Incarnation, the Word becoming flesh? I finish with the words of Tiny Tim in A Christmas Carol. A Merry Christmas to us all. God bless us, every one.
Thank you so much, Father David. That was really interesting, and I have to say you've set us up with some great reflection questions. We're going to explore a couple of those questions now with our next guests, Barney and Anna. They are a wonderful couple and they're very involved at Worth Parish. They're also coordinators for a youth project known as The Ascent, and I desperately want to tell you more about that now, but I don't want to turn this into an advert. They are a beautiful family with 3 lovely daughters and a 4th baby on the way. So let's hear from them now.
So firstly, thank you both for being here today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us and to hear a little bit about your stories.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
No, you're welcome. We're all invited, right? So I've been asking people, who is Jesus to you? So let's hear what you've got to say about that. Who's going first?
I can go first.
Yeah.
I found this question very interesting. Who is Jesus to me? And kind of reflecting back over my life, I feel like Jesus has been everything and so many different things at different times. He can, because he is the Lord of everything, he can be whatever I need in a particular moment. So when I was younger, very much a very close friend, a comforter, a great support. And I feel like I really love, especially in Advent, like looking at the names of Jesus, which come up a lot in the scriptures, and reflecting on those. That like every time I find a new one that resonates, something of that stays. So now I really do feel like he is everything. And now moving into like this time of family life, I do, and also like deepening friendships with families around me who we're kind of living life with. I do feel like friend is the key word, because my dear and true friends are those who love me, support me, but they also challenge me and help me to grow. And so I do feel like he's everything, but at the moment the word friend is the key word, I think. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and for me, I think the thing that came to mind when I saw the question was that he is the person who I try to build my life around, and sometimes I do that better than others, I think. But one of the things that I've felt a lot, particularly in the last couple of years, is that when we pursue the Lord, we're very rarely static, and there's always something new and something different. And so my relationship with Jesus, my understanding of who he is, has changed and developed as I've grown, from being a really kind of kind, gentle man, maybe as a child, to being a friend and a confidant during my teenage years. And I've been involved in some men's ministry more recently, and that's led me to explore a little bit more about authentic Christian masculinity and Jesus as the archetype of that. And I think that's shifted my view a little bit, or maybe not shifted, but revealed a different part of who Jesus is. And I've been sitting, I guess, more with him as a brother, which has been an interesting development for me. But yeah, I think it all comes back to really he is the person that I try to build my life around, and then a bit like Anna said, there can be different facets of that at different times.
Thank you so much for that. Genuinely, I want to do a whole separate episode on that.
It's quite a repeating question, isn't it? I do.
Yeah.
At first I thought, I don't know what to say. I think the more I prayed with it,
So you kind of touched on the fact that this understanding of Jesus has grown with you. Do you mind sharing a little bit maybe about your backstories and kind of a bit more detail about how you got there?
Sure. Are we going in the same order?
Go for it.
I grew up in a Catholic family, with faith it was an important part of our lives. I wouldn't say that it was the central part of our lives, but we definitely, it existed outside of Sunday Mass, and we a lot of our time was given over to service in the parish and being part of various events and conferences and stuff. And when I was about 15, through friends pretty much and where I lived, I was brought along to the Celebrate conference, which was a conference that happened in Devon over Easter time. And there, the key thing for me really was at that age, meeting other young people who had faith, who are still friends today, lots of them, and learning how to pray. And I think that was the key thing those two things are the key things that have helped me to continue my journey, is learning the importance of prayer, of daily prayer, of spending time with the Lord, and having people to do that alongside you. And so many other experiences along the journey, the key one being what I call like my reconversion at 21. And it was a summer off from university, my second year of university, and the Lord took me on this crazy journey, which I had no idea where I was going next, what was happening next. Though looking back, I'm able to see that he really planned it well. That's he does. But a group of us experienced the Holy Spirit in a new way that we never had, and were sort of set on fire with love for God. And we'd all been Catholic most of our lives, but there was something new that happened. And then he took me to some teachings. I did 2 weeks worth of apologetics teaching, learning about the faith and the scriptures and the church, which I'd never really known. So that was huge, and he'd kind of prepared my heart to receive that teaching for it to land well. And then brought me to Worth Abbey, where I'd never really, I think I'd been there once before, for a week of silence, and then ended taking me to an ecumenical conference where I just kind of spent the week praising the Lord for the great things that he'd done. And from there, there was a real change, and I think like my friends at university could see it, that there was something that was new. I was still Anna, and I still enjoyed the same things, and but there was something deeper, I think, in our relationships as well, and in our friendships, of what I was able to give, because I had more of the Lord in me to give to them. And from that point, just felt actually I want to give my life to the Lord in a more radical way. And so post-university, have pretty much lived in some form of community ever since, seeking formation to keep learning, seeking a community to pray with, because I'm very weak on my own. And lived with the Wellspring community in Brighton for a few years, and then felt called to Rome. So I went to Rome initially for 9 months, but ended up there for 3 years.
Wow.
Because that's what the Lord does. And I had amazingly formative years, and well, Barney can share more in his testimony, but he ended up in Rome too, and that's where our relationship began. Well, we got home from Rome, and then we've been living our family life together ever since. And I think the key thing that I've now seen, I discovered in Rome, but I've now seen the Lord working through my whole life, and something I always try to hold on to is that the school was based on 4 pillars. So it had the pillar of prayer, which was always the most important one that everything was formed around. Then there was formation, so continuing to grow, to remain teachable, to learn. Then community, so living with other people, with Christian alone is a Christian in danger. And mission, so always being involved in some sort of service. It doesn't have to be explicitly like we did street evangelization in St. Peter's Square.
That's not
it doesn't necessarily have to be something like that, but you know, serving the Lord in whatever way he calls you to in your particular moment.
Sure.
And so they're the things that in my personal life, in our married life, in our family life, that we're always trying to seek, that we're living those 4 pillars for our family. So
should we bring Barney in now?
you can fill in the gaps now, Barney.
Yeah, so I think similar to Anna, I grew up in a Catholic family as well. My dad was a novice at Worth before getting married, so he spent a few months training to be a monk before discerning out and into married life. So we always had a connection to Worth, and I think that was the most important way that our faith was not just lived on a Sunday. So we would come to Worth every Easter, coming together with lots of other families and celebrating the Triduum together. And then that led into my teenage years, where I would come to Worth on retreat. So I grew up in South Wales, so it was a bit of a trek to get to Worth. But I remember the train journeys fondly. So those weekends of retreat with a group of teenagers who were cool, who were interested in their faith, who were willing to explore it, and we explored it together, was really powerful for me. I think particularly my parish life, there wasn't much going on. We were one of the only families really of children at my age growing up, so there wasn't really anything to hold me or to keep me coming back really. Which is where Worth is. I've always thought of it as my spiritual home really, because that's where I was able to explore my faith. I was given that space to do that, and I felt a little bit like during my teenage years I had these moments. So there was 3 retreat weekends during the year, and normally a week in the summer that I would go to Worth, and we'd have these pockets of an explosion of faith, I guess. But then I take it home, and it might be sustained. Like a prayer life might be sustained for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks if it was a particularly good weekend. But it didn't. It didn't stick. And then towards the end of when I was about 16, I got involved in the Lourdes pilgrimage with the Diocese of Arundel and Brighton, from South Wales still, but they're not actually living in the diocese. But I went,
exception to the
so I went as a 16-year-old with the red chairs, and that kind of has become my second spiritual home, I think, in Lourdes. So I went as a 16-year-old as a red shirt, and then back as a helper. And I remember really vividly my second year as a helper. It was my second year, or at the end of my first or second year of university, and I'd been sort of flitting in and out of faith, like I mentioned, with the retreats, and then times when it didn't feel so alive. And I remember sitting in the grotto kind of in the middle of the night and wrestling with this a little bit, and coming to a point where I really felt like I'd hit a crossroads and I couldn't continue this flip-flapping between, and I needed to make a decision that I was either going to commit and be all in or get out. So I think of it as a little bit going from an orange, where I've got segments of my life, and sometimes Jesus is there, but sometimes he's not, and he's not involved in different bits, to being a peach, where it's like all one thing and Jesus is the centre, as I mentioned earlier. And so yeah, that was a really powerful moment for me. And I wouldn't say that ever since then I've got everything right, bang on at all. But it's meant that I've got a flight path. I think is a good way to think of it. And I know where my destination is, and I might stray every now and then, but I'm always coming back to that flight path. And that's been that's a moment that really made a difference. And it meant that I was then committing myself regularly to finding out more about who Jesus was. So I'd had these experiences at retreats, but I wanted to bring that into my daily life. And then, and that affected my choice of career. So I was a teacher for 8 years, but now work in finance. But that was really important for me in terms of my discernment process, knowing Jesus. And then, as Anna mentioned, I spent a year in Rome because I'd felt like I hadn't really had that, those 4 key pillars really, that I wasn't quite living them out as I'd like to. So that year was really formative. When obviously Anna and I did know each other before that, but that was a really important time where we really built a solid friendship. And the rest, as they say, is history.
So I'm loving what you're saying about this kind of choices that you've made, that you've kind of been through these sorts of things, and your family's been really important to that. So you've got little ones of your own now.
Yeah,
Have
3 girls and a boy, finally.
Finally got a boy.
The boy, he's right.
So how does faith what does that look like in your day-to-day lives with your family? How do you help your kids kind of make a home for Jesus in their lives?
Yeah, it's not always easy. So our eldest is 4, and at the moment we've got a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and then one on the way. So we've got quite a lot of chaos, I think, in our house. Absolutely. But I think we're beginning now to sort of plan out the next stage when our eldest is going to be 5 quite soon. So we're starting to think, okay, she's able to do more. We're able to kind of teach her more about how to pray and kind of get a bit more serious, I suppose, rather than it being a bit more playful. But we did a course called Parenting for Faith a while ago that a friend of ours was organising, and one of the things that really stuck out, I think, for both of us from that was the importance of creating windows into a life of faith for your children, so that they can see that you are living a life of faith, and that kind of almost by osmosis affects them, and rather than anything that you teach them, you kind of show them and you create opportunities for them to see that. And so we both have half an hour of prayer time every morning, and so the girls see that, and they see that we take our time of prayer in the morning, and they know, okay, mummy's going up for prayer now, and daddy's going up for prayer now, and they know that. And this is very rare, but we have had moments where Constance, our eldest, comes upstairs and grabs a prayer book and comes and sits with us. And those are the moments where we think, okay, right, something's happening. When we're doing prayer before bed and they're all running around, there is a moment where actually, okay, something is getting in there. And I remember not long ago I was driving the girls in the car. Anna wasn't there, and an ambulance went past. And I heard a little voice from the back going, "We need to pray for them." I was like, "Why do we need to pray for them?" It's like, "Mummy tells us we need to pray for them." I was like, "This is great. That's become a habit for them."
And when there's a particular road we drive into to drop off a nursery, and it's tiny, and there's usually not parking, and so now when we turn in, they say, "Come, Holy Spirit, please let there be a parking space." Yeah.
They say faith is caught, not taught.
Yeah,
right?
they do.
So
Yes.
And I think that's something that, for both of us in our journeys, prayer is the key thing. And there have been many times when we've both been in ministry and serving the church, basically since we were teenagers. It's very easy to just think that I'm serving and I'm reading, I don't know, all these things, but actually if you're not praying, the praying and spending time with our Lord and allowing him to transform our hearts allows us to do all these other things better and with greater capacity, because he gives us the strength that we need. And so I think that is the key priority, and it's hard with tiny children, We don't get it right, or we're not able to do it every day necessarily because something happens. But like you said about the flight path, like we have in our schedule that every morning we both have a half an hour of prayer, and the kids know that, and that's prioritized. And we try to stick to that every day. And I think that, like you say, will do more for them than anything else we can do. We buy all the books for them to read about the scriptures and the saints, and it is really beautiful. Obviously, it's good. Yeah. It's all good stuff, and having images around our home, and we pray with them also, grace at meals and at dinner time, and the rosary when we can. But like teaching them how to pray and showing them that prayer is important, I think, is like the key thing that we are holding on to, even if it is a sacrifice for us, and difficult, and we don't always get it right. But that's what we're. Yeah.
I think there will be a lot of parents and grandparents listening that found your comment about evening prayer quite reassuring. It's just chaos.
Oh my gosh.
Because I imagine even Our Lady and the Holy Family, they.
So true.
It probably wasn't the perfect image that we imagined it was, right? Take comfort in that.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's kind of it, really. I've really loved hearing your stories. The theme of today's episode is kind of about making a home for Christ and kind of leaving a legacy. And I just thank you for the legacy that you're leaving in your children and in your service to your parish and to the wider church.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank
you both.
Thank you so much, Barney and Anna, for giving your time to speak to us today. It was a pleasure to hear your stories. It's time now for all of us to consider how we make Jesus the centre of everything. I heard once about this fruit analogy for Christ. Are we an orange or are we a peach? If we're an orange, our life is in segments, and Jesus and our faith is just one segment of that, but it doesn't really interact with everything else. But if we are a peach, then Jesus is the core of that fruit, and our life surrounds it, and he is the centre of everything. Something to think about, perhaps. What you can also do is have a little look at the resources that are available on our website at abdiocese.org.uk/invited. There you will discover prayers and reflection questions that will help you to dive a little bit deeper, whether on your own or with a group. This brings this season to a close, but we will be with you again soon. Our next season will be taking place in Lent 2024, which is not far away, so we look forward to you joining us again then. But in the meantime, do keep an eye on the diocesan website and our social media channels for a special message from our Bishop Richard on Christmas Day. Have a wonderful Christmas, and I'll see you all again soon. God bless.
Come to the Father, come one and all. You are invited, so take up the call. His mercy can cover what's gone before, so come as you are.